A warm welcome to Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. This week, our focus is on U.S. President Joe Biden's visit to the Middle East and the discussions and criticisms. We'll be navigating with Professor of International Relations at the University of Abuja, Professor Saleh Dauda. Then, July 14 every year is Bastille Day in France. We'll hear from the ambassador to Nigeria, Emmanuel Blackman, on the country's relations with Nigeria. That's Diplomatic Channel in a wrap. But as usual, let's check in on other discussions in diplomatic circles, and we'll be right back.
European Union foreign ministers are hoping to show that the bloc can maintain its financial and military support for Ukraine, despite the risk of fatigue 5 months after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Speaking before the meeting, the European Foreign Policy Chief, Josep Borrell, says imposing sanctions on Russia is the right decision despite rising food and energy prices. The comment comes as foreign ministers are likely to approve another 500 million euros of EU funding to supply arms to Ukraine, taking the bloc's security support to 2 billion euros since Russian forces swept into Ukraine on February 24. They are close to agreeing an import ban on Russian gold. The French President Emmanuel Macron has warned against anti-Semitism and historical revisionism as he commemorated victims of the Holocaust on the 80th anniversary of the Veldiv roundup of Jewish families. On July 16 to 17, 1942, around 13,000 people were taken to the winter velodrome, the Veldiv, in Paris before being sent on to concentration camps across Europe. It was the largest mass detention of Jewish people by French police in collaboration with the Nazi German occupiers. President Macron spoke at the inauguration of a memorial in the central town of Pit-Havers, about 100 kilometers south of Paris. Pit-Havers was the second largest transit camp and deportation point in France for Jews after Drancy. The president warned against a new type of revisionism and reiterated the active role of France in targeting Jewish people during the occupation. The Shoah Memorial in Paris, which collects archives on France's Holocaust victims, has launched an appeal to reach the last witnesses and survivors of the Veldiv roundup.
Welcome back. The U.S. President Joe Biden has returned home following his visit to the Middle East. It was a 4-day trip that took him to Israel, Palestine, and Saudi Arabia. Here's a roundup.
The U.S. President Joe Biden is back from his 4-day trip to Israel and Saudi Arabia, his first to the Middle East as president, aimed at resetting ties with the Gulf Arab oil giant and demonstrating U.S. commitment to the region and countering the rising influence of Iran, Russia and China. Thorny optics, however, overshadowed the Saudi leg as the U.S. president avoided appearing to embrace a crown prince implicated by U.S. intelligence in the brutal 2018 murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Everything about the U.S. president's visit to Saudi Arabia was under scrutiny, especially his body language, and it all began with a fist bump with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He later shook hands with Saudi King Salman when they met on Friday. During a press briefing after his meetings, he told the Crown Prince he held him responsible for the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi as they held talks. He said the Crown Prince denied involvement and said he had held those responsible to account. U.S. intelligence says the Crown Prince directly approved the murder of Khashoggi, a Saudi insider turned critic, by Saudi agents. It was clear the U.S. president was in Saudi Arabia for more economic reasons, discussing energy and security interests in both countries.
Saudi Arabia will also partner with us on a far-reaching clean energy initiative focused on green hydrogen, solar, carbon capture, nuclear, and other projects to accelerate the world's clean energy transition and to help the U.S. clean energy industry set global standards. And fifth, we had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth.
Before his visit to Saudi Arabia, President Joe Biden had visited Israel, where he and Prime Minister Yair Lapid signed a joint pledge to deny Iran nuclear arms, a show of unity by allies long divided over diplomacy with Tehran.
We've laid out for the people, for the leadership of Iran, what we're willing to accept in order to get back in the JCPOA. We're waiting for the response. When that will come, I'm not certain, but we are not going to wait forever.
Words will not stop them, Mr. President. Diplomacy will not stop them. The only thing that will stop Iran is knowing that if they continue to develop their nuclear program, the free world will use force. The only way to stop them is to put a credible military threat on the table.
President Biden was later awarded with the Israeli Presidential Medal of Honor in Jerusalem. President Joe Biden arrived in Bethlehem on Friday and was welcomed by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. During his discussion, the president acknowledged that the creation of an independent Palestinian state remained a distant prospect, with no immediate prospect of new talks with Israel. Abbas said prospect for a two-state solution to the conflict, the model favored by the United States and the world bodies, including the United Nations, were receding and the opportunity may not remain for a long time. The president ended his trip with a pledge of an additional $100 million to support hospitals in East Jerusalem as part of a multi-year commitment aimed at helping Palestinian health services. President Biden also attended the Gulf Countries Conference in Saudi Arabia, where he met with Iraq and Egypt's leaders. He said the U.S. will remain an active, engaged partner in the Middle East and called on leaders gathered to see human rights as a powerful force of economic and social change.
Joining me now is Professor of International Relations at the University of Abuja, Professor Saleh Dauda. He joins me from our studio in Abuja. Professor Saleh, thank you for joining me on the program today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Now, I want to begin with your thoughts on President Biden's visit to the Middle East. How important do you think this was for America?
Well, to properly appreciate President Biden's visits to the Middle East, you have to understand it within the context of the issue of human rights in the United States foreign policy. This thing became so prominent in 1976 when Jimmy Carter came out with the policy of human rights as an instrument of America's foreign policy. Unless we forget that America is the only country in the world that has the machinery, the elements of national power to prosecute a global foreign policy agenda. And regarding President Biden's visits to the Middle East and more especially Saudi Arabia is testimony to the fact that in international relations, in most cases, economic interests overrides other foreign policy principles. Remember, Biden, during the election, had described the Saudi government as a pariah government, and therefore he would have nothing to do with the government. But with the reality on the ground, it becomes very expedient that America must do business with Saudi Arabia. So it has very important significance as far as America is concerned. The most important thing is now that there is war in Ukraine and America is facing an energy crisis, it's very important that Biden visited Saudi Kingdom and to ensure that there should be a free flow of energy to the United States of America. I think these are some of the most important gains. And you should also realize that he has made some significant achievements because Saudi government has accepted that it's going to increase its oil production to about 13 million barrels per day. So to me, it's a very significant development in U.S.-Saudi relations.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that you begin with Saudi Arabia because the visit was to the Middle East. He also visited Israel, was in Palestine. He met with the Iraqi Prime Minister and also met with the UAE Minister. But since you began with the Saudi Arabia visits, let's continue from there. From the moment that, he met with the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, and the fist bump, he received much criticism back home. And many people said America is weak. The U.S. president trying to once again rekindle relations with Saudi Arabia.
Biden shouldn't be described as a weak president because he is being realistic in global politics. In foreign policy, economic consideration do override any other consideration. Now, his popularity at home is dwindling simply because of the price of gas, and that Saudi Arabia is in a position to offset that problem. So his engagement in Saudi Arabia is born out of the economic necessity of the United States of America. And I said earlier on that in foreign policy and international relations, economic consideration, national interests override all other consideration. So his engagement in Saudi Arabia is born by the fact that he needed Saudi's oil to cushion the effects of the war going on between Russia and Ukraine. So it's not the issue of whether he's a weak president. No, he is a realist going by the economic details that the U.S. found itself now.
Yeah, but some others would say there is a similarity between President Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia and former President Donald Trump's visit to Russia. After, of course, the U.S. government had accused Russia of intervening in the U.S. elections that brought Donald Trump into power. And I remember that President Trump did say he also asked Putin if he had interfered in America's elections. He asked him 3 times and he said Putin denied it. And then here you have a President Biden who's saying he also talked about Jamal Khashoggi's murder with the Saudi Crown Prince and he denied any personal involvement. You understand the similarities we're drawing here?
Yeah. The similarities you are drawing here, one can say that in the case of President Trump's visit to Russia, I don't think there was any economic necessity. And as I said earlier on, the economic necessity forced Biden to visit Middle East and more especially Saudi Arabia. So the economic necessity is the overriding factor. And foreign policy or international relations is not conducted on the basis of moral high grounds. Rather, it is conducted on the basis of economic interests. And the economic reality, the economic interest in America as it is today, made it necessary for Biden to engage the Saudi government. Mind you, he too, Biden, is facing a sort of a credibility problem in the United States of America simply because of the prices, the cost of gas in the United States of America. So you don't conduct foreign policy or international relations on the basis of moral principles, but on the basis of economic necessity. And in the case of the Biden visits to Saudi Arabia, it is the economic necessity that has made him to visit that. So there's no basis for comparing Trump's visit to Russia and then Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia.
The Israeli Prime Minister did say that if Iran knows the free world will use force, the only way to stop stop a nuclear Iran, is if Iran knows the free world will use force. I think that, speaks to the military option that you're talking about. But is it absolutely necessary? I mean, there are other countries that are also developing nuclear weapons. North Korea, for one, is also defying international conventions to go ahead and develop weapons of mass destruction.
Well, there is this mutual understanding or mutual respect or economic interest or ties between the United States of America and Israel. Anything that touches Israel, as far as America is concerned, it also touches its own interests. And that Iran posed a serious threat to the Israelis, and that from all indications, America will not take it lightly. Iran has stated clearly that if given the opportunity, she can wipe the state of Israel from the face of the earth. Therefore, anything that touches the state of Israel also touches the interests of the United States of America. I think it's on that basis that the free world are advocating that, or the Israeli Prime Minister is saying that if Iran persists in developing its nuclear potentialities, then the military option should not, the military option should be on the table if it becomes. I don't think whether North Korea poses a direct threat to the state of Israel, as Iran is now, right now.
Indeed. And the U.S. president was also in Palestine. You talked about the two-state solution. You're right. He said nothing about it, made no clarifications, on a two-state solution. And that's what the Palestinians are looking forward to, of course, wasn't it? When he met with Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian nation itself. And then, of course, they probably also wanted him to speak to, the journalist, the Palestinian journalist who was killed by Israeli forces in the West Bank, and he also disappointed them with no mention of that as well. What sort of relationship do you think the U.S. really has with Palestine?
My little understanding is that whether Democrat or under Republican, the United States of America, they have a very soft spot for the state of Israel. And that the fact that he just mentioned two-state solution without laying any framework for actualizing that dream, and the fact that he did not even mention about the killing of the journalists, this is to show you that most of these statements are mere political statements. I don't think whether they have the interest or they are willing to put resources to ensure that there is two-state solution. Mike, this two-state solution has been on for the past so many years now, but nothing has been put on ground to actualize these two-state solution. So my take or my understanding is that they have a consensus on how to deal with the Palestinians, and that whatever they say is just a mere political statement, not that they actually want to implement it on the ground. Okay, if you want a two-state solution, what is the framework? What is the roadmap? No roadmap. So to me, as far as I'm concerned, it's just a mere political statement.
Yeah, and disappointment.
With no,
Sorry, I'm just saying, and just a disappointment to the Palestinians as well, who, well, they didn't have high hopes, though, for this meeting. But President Biden also met with the Iraqi Prime Minister, Mustafa al-Kadhimi, and he made it clear that Iraq will not be part of any military alliance. He also met with the UAE President, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, in Jeddah during the GCC summit. What do you think he gained from these meetings? Because there's so much talk about Saudi Arabia that, these other meetings are kind of like in the shadows of that.
Well, the gains, if I can put it that way, is that Biden has made it very clear that America would not look the other way, and that America would not abandon Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states to any foreign power. And he made mention of Russia and China. Therefore, his coming to Saudi Arabia is to tell members of the Gulf and also to send somehow a subtle signal to both China and Russia that they are still far in the Middle East, and their interest, their strategic interest is still very, very intact. I think that's the message. And you know, Russia and China, more especially China, is all over the world. Any vacuum created by the United States of America, China is likely to cash in. But his presence in Saudi Arabia and in attending the Gulf States meeting is a clear warning, a clear signal that America is much on ground. And lest we forget, America has the power, has the configuration of the elements of national power to protect and maintain its interests in the world.
Professor Saleh, thank you so much for speaking with me. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Bastille Day is on July 14 every year for France and its overseas departments and territories, marking the anniversary of the fall on July 14, 1789 of the Bastille in France. Here in Lagos, celebrations were on the 15th with the ambassador present.
Bastille Day celebration in Lagos was marked at the Eric Case restaurant, Lance Francais in Lagos. Amongst invited guests were French citizens living in Nigeria, members of the French business community in Nigeria, Nigeria business partners, members of the diplomatic corps, people in the arts, and friends of France. The ambassador, Emmanuel Blattman, welcomed the guests and thanked them for their warm welcome of her when she assumed ambassadorial duties 9 months ago.
I express first my deepest thanks for the very warm welcome I have received ever since I arrived here exactly 9 months ago. Secondly, I would also like to express the wish, as we approach another important electoral year for their country, that the coming elections will take place safely and confirm once again the vitality and credibility of the Nigerian democracy.
The Consul General in Lagos, Mrs. Lawrence Mommiron, spoke about the value of Nigeria-France relations.
Our community entertains very dynamic ties with Nigerian partners, and we are delighted to host you all tonight. Our consular work also entails the issuance of visas, as you know, and we do our best to cope with the challenging demand with 20,000 files over the last 12 months. But of course, this rise in travel between France and Nigeria is a good news for our economic relations, as our ambassador has just pointed out. The consulate also works strongly in economic and cultural areas with Lagos State. I will not cite them all because there are very numerous projects, from cooperation with French Agency on Transport to cooperation on e-sport, just for instance, and many others.
Later on, Ambassador Blattman, France's first female ambassador to Nigeria, spoke to us about the partnership going on between France and Nigeria and how relations have grown.
France and Nigeria have a very long history and a very dense, strong and diversified cooperation. And we have a very unique network here in Nigeria, within Abuja, where we have the embassy in Abuja, the consulate general in Lagos, but we also have 2 French schools, one in Abuja, one in Lagos. We also have a French Institute cultural center in Abuja, and we also have, besides this magnificent Alliance Française Mike Adenuga Center, we also have 9 other Alliance Française throughout the country.
Bastille Day, a national holiday in France, marks the fall on July 14, 1972, 1789, of the Bastille in France. Originally built as a medieval fortress, the Bastille eventually came to be used as a state prison. Political prisoners were often held there, as were citizens detained by the authorities for trial. Although it was little used in the 18th century and was scheduled to be demolished, it has become a symbol of the harsh rule of the Bourbon monarchy. During the unrest of 1789 on July 14th, a mob approached the Bastille to demand arms and ammunition stored there, and when the forces guarding the structure resisted, the attackers captured the prison and released the 7 prisoners held there. The taking of the Bastille signaled the beginning of the French Revolution and became a symbol of the end of the Ancien regime.
This is where we end the program this week. Thank you for joining us and thank you for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.